Welcome to Short Movie Channel. Our movie today begins with a group of young people dealing drugs. One of them seems overly hyper, grabs a gun, and starts shooting along the way until he ends up killing a woman. We quickly learn that these guys are reckless youth who spend their days abusing drugs, engaging in thuggish behavior, and showing no respect for anything. Soon after, we're introduced to Harry, the main character of our movie today. Harry is a former naval officer who seems to have nothing left in life except for his sick wife, who's hospitalized, and his lifelong friend, Leonard, whom he fondly calls Len. Harry spends most of his days going back and forth between the hospital to visit his wife and a cafe where he hangs out with Len. They usually have a drink, play chess, and joke around with each other. One day, while Harry and Len are at the cafe, a shady-looking guy walks in, meets someone, and buys drugs. Len turns to Harry and tells him that the cafe owner isn't as nice as he seems. He's actually involved in selling drugs, weapons, and even young girls. A short while later, Harry goes to the hospital to visit his wife as usual, but this time, he finds out she has passed away. Devastated, he mourns her deeply. Afterward, he goes straight to Len, who's now the only person he has left in the world. One day, Len confesses to Harry that he's terrified of the drugged-out thugs who have taken over the area. He explains that they're nothing but criminal kids with no upbringing or discipline. Harry tells Len to report them to the police, but Len replies that he already has, and nothing was done about it. One night, Len wakes up to a thick cloud of smoke in his apartment. He gets up to investigate and realizes those same thugs have set his place on fire. Angry and frustrated, he steps outside to curse them out. The next day, Detective Alice and Sergeant Hickok visit Harry at home to inform him that his friend Len was murdered. They explain that they found his body in a pedestrian tunnel. Harry asks if they've identified the killer yet, but they respond that the investigation is still ongoing and leave their contact information with him before departing. Heartbroken, Harry sits and cries for his friend. Meanwhile, Detective Alice and Sergeant Hickok begin investigating Len's murder and question all the local troublemakers and suspicious youth in the area. However, they don't uncover any useful leads about the killer. One night, Harry goes out for a drink to try and forget his pain. On his way home, he walks through the same tunnel where Len was murdered. There, he encounters one of the young thugs who pulls a knife on him, attempting to rob him. But it's clear the thug doesn't know who he's dealing with. Harry swiftly disarms him, turns the knife on him, and leaves him bleeding before walking away. When Harry gets home, he notices bloodstains on his clothes from the encounter. He cleans up, disposes of the evidence, and goes to bed. The next morning, Detective Alice shows up at Harry's door again, asking if they could talk for a bit. She apologizes if the timing isn't convenient, but Harry invites her in anyway. Inside, she notices a photo of Harry receiving naval medals. She informs him that they found a knife used in Len's murder, which had fingerprints and fibers from Harry's clothing. This implicates Harry, but he explains that the knife was used in self-defense against the thugs who had been harassing Len. Alice acknowledges his story but expresses concern that even if the killer is found, the defense attorney might argue it was a case of self-defense, making it difficult to ensure justice for Len. Harry realizes that justice may not be served through the legal system, so he retrieves an old pistol and prepares himself for action. Later, he visits Len's apartment and finds a broken window. Looking out, he spots the same group of thugs attacking a young man and woman nearby, brutally beating them. Filled with rage, Harry vows to avenge Len. That night, Harry follows one of the thugs to a location where they buy weapons. Harry walks in, confronts the dealers, and pretends he's interested in purchasing firearms. One thug mocks him, saying, "Come on, old man. Your time is over, the war's long gone." The dealer asks Harry what he plans to do with the weapons. Harry replies, "Hunt." The dealer finds his response amusing and agrees to sell him a gun. Inside the stash house, Harry sees all kinds of drugs, illegal activities, and even a girl in a terrible state. When Harry suggests the girl needs medical help, the dealer snaps at him, telling him to mind his own business and take his weapon. Harry evaluates the situation and notices the two dealers are heavily intoxicated. One is sniffing drugs, while the other is injecting himself. Using the opportunity, Harry attacks them. He stabs one with a knife and shoots the other in the head. He then chases down a third thug and kills him too. Afterward, Harry gathers all the weapons and ammunition, takes the injured girl with him, and sets the entire place on fire before driving away. He stops in front of a hospital, honks the car horn loudly to get attention, and leaves the girl for medical care before disappearing into the night. The next day, we see Detective Alice at the police inspector's office. She went there to ask him about the Lynn case, but he tells her that he's currently focused on another case involving two arms dealers who were killed in the fire that broke out in their house. The inspector adds that the police are launching a cleanup operation in Blue Jay, aimed at addressing violent crimes and the use of firearms. He also informs her that he'll be leading the team and requests a full report on the case from her and Sergeant Hickok for him to follow up on. Later, we switch to Harry, who goes to a church and notices the gang entering it. He leaves right after. At the hospital, the girl who had been with the gang is receiving treatment after Harry dropped her off in front of the hospital. Sergeant Hickok and Detective Alice arrive at the hospital to meet the girl. Alice wonders aloud, "Who killed the drug dealers and brought her here for treatment?" After that, Harry visits the grave of his friend Lynn, as if assuring him that he'll avenge his death. That night, Harry watches the criminals from his window and notices one of them meeting another gang member, taking money from him and shouting, "Where's the rest?" The man then calls for Mark, takes him into the car, and engages in despicable actions with him. Harry intervenes, stands in front of the car, and kills the man, leaving Mark terrified. Harry puts a black bag over Mark's head and takes him to the tunnel where his friend Lynn was killed. At the tunnel, Harry asks Mark, "Who's Lynn?" Mark responds, "I don't know anything about this." Harry punches him and says, "Tell me what happened with Lynn." Mark replies with insults, prompting Harry to threaten him with a gun. "If you don't talk, I'll shoot your knee until you confess." Mark finally gives in and starts to tell the story. He says that an old man came at them with a big knife, threatening them. Mark claims they told the man to leave and that they wouldn't harm him, but the man wouldn't move. Harry responds angrily. "And then?" Mark continues, "Nothing much. I hit him a couple of times and walked away. I didn't do anything else." Harry doubts Mark's words and says, "Do you really expect me to believe you?" Mark responds, "I don't care whether you believe me or not." Harry replies, "Oh, you better care if you want to walk out of here on your own legs." Harry then threatens Mark with the gun again, causing him to panic and curse hysterically. Harry says, "Goodbye, Mark," and fires a shot near him. Mark confesses that the whole incident is recorded on his phone. Harry is stunned and asks, "What did you just say?" Mark apologizes and says it was all just revenge. When Harry watches the video, he breaks down in tears, heartbroken to see his friend being treated like a toy in the hands of the criminals, who stabbed him mercilessly with a knife. Harry asks Mark, "Who stabbed him?" Mark denies any involvement, claiming he only filmed the video. Harry replies, "Then who did it?" Later, at the curse tunnel, we see the gang standing with some unruly girls. Suddenly, Mark appears, tied up hand and foot, with a chain around his neck like a dog. His face is bruised and battered from the beatings. Mark tells the gang that someone has a gun. The gang members immediately draw their guns and ask, "Who's got the weapon, kid?" Mark answers, "It's some crazy guy, you guys." They start firing randomly, accidentally killing one of their own. Meanwhile, Harry, hiding in the shadows, shoots one of them and chases the other. The second man, now injured, stumbles near a canal, throws his gun into the water, and passes out. The next day, Harry wakes up in the hospital, and the investigator calls on him, accompanied by Sergeant Hickok, who personally greets him. Hickok asks Harry if he remembers anything, and Harry responds, "Of course." Hickok then says, "Can I ask you a few questions?" Harry nods in agreement, but the doctor enters and tells them Harry is still tired and insists that any questions be postponed until he's feeling better. The investigator agrees but later approaches the nurse to ask about Harry's condition. The nurse explains that Harry has lung swelling and advises her to consult the doctor for further details. The nurse takes Harry outside to move him but forgets his coat. The investigator picks it up, looks it over, and then hands it back to the nurse. Shortly after, Hickok shows her something related to the witness, and she asks, "Where did you find this?" He points to the place where Harry was discovered. The investigator then asks, "Did anyone search him when they found him?" Hickok replies, "Why would anyone search a man who was shot?" She then questions, "What do you think Harry was doing in that place?" Hickok replies, "He could have been walking his dog or something." She counters, "But I smelled gunpowder on his coat." At this point, Hickok becomes uneasy and says, "Sorry, my supervisor arrived about 15 minutes ago, and I need to go." He quickly excuses himself and leaves. At the police station, the inspector prepares to leave, stating, "I have 13 arrest warrants, and I'm heading out to execute them right now. Hopefully, this witness of yours is worth all this trouble." The investigator admits, "We can't rely on the witness. He told me he didn't see anything." The inspector responds, "That's disappointing to hear." However, as they leave, the investigator tells the inspector, "I don't think Harry is just a witness. I believe he's the prime suspect in our case." The inspector questions her reasoning, saying, "How?" "I got a report from the investigation office stating they found an elderly man at the crime scene." She replies, "That's correct, but Harry happens to be the only friend of the elderly man who was murdered in the pedestrian tunnel. It's the same tunnel where yesterday's incident occurred. Also, the 2 kids who died were among the suspects in the old man's murder. This can't all just be a coincidence." The inspector responds, "So you're suggesting that all this violence is part of some revenge plan carried out by this elderly man?" He then challenges her, "Do you have any evidence to support this theory?" She admits, "I'm still looking, but I need your permission to test for gunpowder residue on Harry's coat." The inspector asks, "Where's Harry now?" The investigator replies, "He's in the hospital, and he's also struggling with a severe respiratory issue due to lung swelling." The inspector changes the subject, saying, "Did you know Troy Martin was killed last night in his car near the tunnel?" He adds, "Martin was one of the biggest heroin importers, and 2 of his street dealers were killed in the same area about 2 weeks ago. With all this going on, didn't you question their connection to the murder of the elderly man in the tunnel?" The investigator shifts back to Harry and says, "He served in the Navy in Northern Ireland, and I have recordings that confirm everything I'm saying." The inspector steps away for a moment, but before he does, he informs the investigator that a major theft case has come up, and they need an experienced investigator like her to handle it. He also tells her she's been recommended for the case, and that she has been approved. He advises her to take the rest of the week off as well. Later that night, the inspector leads a large team of officers, conducting raids on multiple houses and arresting suspects. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Harry regains consciousness and removes his medical equipment. At the same time, a gang related to the arrested suspects gathers outside, attacking police officers with rocks, Molotov cocktails, and acts of vandalism. Back at the hospital, Harry escapes. A nurse sees him and calls out, but he ignores her and takes the elevator. Elsewhere, the investigator goes to the police station to apologize to the sergeant. He sarcastically says, "Do you really think an old man with breathing problems can kill all these people?" She responds, "For your information, I called the hospital to check on him and found out he escaped. I believe he's going back to the same neighborhood where the incident occurred, and I also think he'll target Noel next." The sergeant shrugs it off, saying, "That's no big deal. Noel's a criminal and the son of a criminal. Who's going to care if he gets killed? Honestly, Harry's doing us a favor." The investigator stares at him in disbelief, but he quickly stands up and says, "Come on, let's get back to work." At that moment, Harry arrives at the apartment, takes out the weapons bag, and grabs a gun. Meanwhile, the detective and the sergeant reach the neighborhood where acts of thuggery are taking place. A group of criminals attacks the detective's car, and another car crashes into it from the other side, setting it on fire. The sergeant gets injured in the head. At this point, Harry appears, opens the car for them, and takes the sergeant and the detective to a nearby cafe where his friend is sitting. Harry asks his friend to call an ambulance. Then the detective says to Harry, "We're not in Northern Ireland, Harry." Harry replies, "I know that. In Ireland, there was war for reasons. But those people out there are killing others for fun, with no reason at all." The detective warns him, "If you kill Noel, Sid will kill you because he's his uncle." Harry gets angry and goes to Sid to ask about Noel, who turns out to be hiding at his place. Sid confronts Noel, who threatens Harry with a gun. Sid yells at Noel, telling him to lower the gun, and says to Harry, "Of course you're not going to kill him. The police are right upstairs." Harry replies, "This man killed my friends." Sid responds, "But he told me he didn't do it, and besides, he's my nephew, my own blood." Harry then asks, "Do you want to see the blood of your friend, Lynn? Fine, watch this video." At that moment, Harry becomes extremely exhausted. Sid takes the gun from him and shoots him. Meanwhile, the detective calls for backup from armed police officers, but Noel surprises her and attacks her, leaving the line open. Sid comes out carrying Harry and throws him to the ground, saying to his nephew, "Listen to me, this is work, not a game." He adds, "We'll kill them here and throw them outside to make it look like they were killed in the riots going on out there." Sid begins choking the sergeant until he dies, while Noel tries to strangle the detective. However, she fights back. At that moment, Harry regains consciousness, pulls out a gun hidden in his sock, and shoots Noel. Sid shoots Harry in the hand, but the police arrive just in time and kill Sid. After the cleanup operation ends, the inspector holds a press conference and awards the Medal of Courage to Sergeant Hickok, who died in the line of duty, as well as to Detective Alice. One of the reporters asks the inspector if the rise in murders is related to revenge acts, and the inspector replies, "There's no evidence to support that." The detective agrees and walks away. In the final scene, our hero is seen walking toward a tunnel. The atmosphere is calm, and everything seems fine. And with that, the events of our film come to an end. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to support us with a like and a subscription if you liked the video.